I'll wait for that. You can do it. Cool. We are live. Thanks everyone for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross Project Council meeting. Today is the 5th of January of a whole new year, which I'm super happy about. And yeah, do we have any announcements or anything before we get into the agenda? Yeah, I haven't Zoomed since last year, yeah, and I'm totally out of whack. Any announcements? No? All right, cool. We will carry on. Anything from the board? Anything that we need to share there? I know it's been probably a quiet few weeks since our last meeting. Cool. If not, I will jump into the agenda that we have here. So the first item is issue 687, prepare to open nominations for the second board seat. So yeah, let's, as commented here almost a month ago, let's start surfacing this upcoming election and start working on the steps that we need to take to run the election and, you know, all the things that kind of go along with that. Does anyone have anything to add here, or?
I wonder if we need to set the timeline for that. Like, when do we need to have the vote? Because I think we looked at it at one point. We had okay, this is the date that it ends, but we should move back from when should the vote happen and so forth, and actually capture them underneath this issue.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need a little work back schedule. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the term ends the last day of February, as it says here on the issue. How long do we expect to have the vote open for?
We've typically had it open for about a week.
Wait, who's that?
That's Jory. Sorry. Hi.
How are
Yes.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Okay, so we'll have it open for a week. How much time do we think we need before vote closes and end of term kind of transition or anything?
It'd be nice to have a week or so.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe 2. Should we just run the vote the beginning of February? Let me look at the calendar here. February 1st is a Monday. Well, we could kick it off on a Tuesday if we want to do it on a CPC meeting day, or we could do it later in February if we don't think we need as much time.
The candidates are CPC members, right?
I believe that's correct, right?
If that's the case, I don't think we need as much time to basically make sure people know it's available and all that. So, opening the vote the beginning of February makes sense to me.
Okay. So open it on the 2nd, close it on the 9th. And then that's essentially 2 weeks to transition. Not that I think that there's really a lot of work that needs to happen there, I guess.
Just give some time to tally the results, let people know that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Also time for runoffs, just in the unlikely scenario that a runoff may be needed.
Yeah, good point.
All right.
And I guess the other thing would just be good to make it more concrete. What kind of, what do we need to do in terms of publicize it? Is it, if we open an issue in the CPC repo, announce at each of the CPC meetings, is that enough, or should we do more than that?
Considering it's CPC members, I don't know how much more. I mean, because my first inclination is let's spread the word, but it's not really as open of you know, for candidates.
And who
We
gets
can
to
do a
vote?
push email. Sorry, Toby. I think that makes
Oh, sorry,
sense.
Robin.
Yeah, for people who are buried in GitHub, we can send a push email.
That's like an email to the CPC list, right?
Yep.
Who gets to vote the CPC?
Yes, voting CPC members, I believe, are the participants in this election.
Mhm. Yeah, so I pasted a link from the charter into the Zoom chat that is specific to this. This is the primary CPC director that we are electing. Eligibility is must be a current CPC member, and voting is CPC voting members, actually.
Who are they now?
The seats,
Primary, secondary, and tertiary CPC directors?
primary is Chris Borchers. Secondary is Michael Dawson. Tertiary is only,
Not available.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Did we vote on this last year and I just spaced it, or
Yes.
is this a new process? We did. Okay. Thank you.
We updated, I think, kind of the terminology a little bit and tried to make clear who's eligible and who votes last year. Which I hope it's more clear now. All right, cool. Yeah.
So I guess it's just like, who's going to open the issue? Who's going to send the email? I'll volunteer to open an issue in the repo if somebody wants to send the email.
I will be happy to send the email and kick the election off.
Sounds
Great.
good. I'll wait for your email and then I'll paste the content into an issue.
Sounds good.
Just adding CPC voting members, just adding a couple of notes here. And then I will copy and paste this into the issue as well for that one. Sorry, y'all. Just drop that in there. And then we'll carry on. Great. Excellent. Cool. Moving on, unless anybody has anything else they want to add or comment on, discuss, whatever. The next issue is 680. This is moving the CPC meetings to a bi-weekly cadence. I started to work on that earlier today. So the idea was that we would move to every other week and that we would keep the alternating 1400 and 1600. Do I have that correct or do I have that backwards? Yeah, for 1700 and 1900. Wow, that's not right, is it? Am I crazy?
1900 is, yeah, no, that's UTC.
Okay, all right.
It is 1900 now, so
okay,
17
cool.
and 19 makes sense.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I don't know why odd numbers, because my number, it's 2 o'clock here. I thought that they always even, but threw me off. So anyway, 1700, 1900. I was looking at it this morning in terms of not conflicting with the standards meeting that currently is biweekly at the 1900 slot. And my original suggestion was that we would have a working meeting, like kind of an informal optional working meeting on the off weeks that would be the same time as the previous week's meeting. That would conflict with the standards meeting once a month or once every 4 weeks. One thought that I had around that, because this sort of working meeting is very optional and such, is that maybe we just keep the working meeting at the 1700 time slot every week, and then we don't have to worry about the standards meeting at all. They would not conflict. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about this or anything or whatever.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I can just say that I'm confident that the standards working group would be happy to accommodate the broader CPC as well. So adjusting its timing or changing frequency to accommodate.
They are a very accommodating group, but I don't know if I don't want to make things more difficult if they don't need to be. So what do people think about this idea of a working meeting on the off weeks? Is there even much interest? I mean, I kind of proposed it because I figure I'll probably kind of earmark that time for myself to make sure I'm staying on top of CPC stuff as in addition to other times throughout the week. But maybe I'm the only one, so maybe it doesn't really matter. I don't know.
I think it's a good idea in that it's hard to find times.
Mm-hmm.
So like we've definitely had some times we needed multiple working sessions, and having a slot where people try and keep available is probably easier than, like, it's a lot of effort to schedule one-offs for sure.
Do we
So
know that?
Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry. Do we know that moving so I think we've been really working to move the times around in order, I understand the goal being in order to make sure we can have some people join that might not be available, also not, prioritizing US, time zones, which makes a ton of sense. So I guess the idea here is to, do we want to rotate the working group in order to do that, or do we want to keep it at the same time so that it's easier for folks to remember? I wonder if we can quantify, or will be ever able to quantify, if a moving meeting is beneficial. And if we can't answer that question, yeah, this isn't a solution, this is more problems, but I just wonder if we know it's been helpful to move things around and how we could know in order to say, okay, it makes sense to have this at a rotating time, or no, this is just confusing.
I mean, I think the reason for that is to get people who aren't in US centric or North America centric time zones in. And so if we're not doing that, then and we want to continue doing it, then the goal becomes the availability. So like we're not actively excluding folks by doing that. And so like, if someone wanted to start coming or start participating, then they have an avenue to that.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that's inherently not valuable or anything. It just like, if we are not hitting, I think the measure for that is, are we getting folks from that time zone? And if not, do we want to revert it, or do we want to change the goal to then be, we want to have the availability for other folks to be joining?
So that when they do want to join. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good point.
I guess
Sarah, let me just ask really quickly, are you asking, Sarah, if we should be considering a different time slot in addition to the 1700 and 1900, or are you just asking about the 1700, 1900?
I'm asking for the 1700, 1900.
Yeah, I think that was just because there were some people that could make the 1700
Oh,
and
okay.
1900. In fact, I thought it was Dylan and Jordan that were two of the people that were like, I can do one and the other one can do the other. So we had both.
Yeah,
but you're both
like 9
here,
a.m.
so I'm not
Pacific. Sure. Like 9 a.m. Pacific is like prime meeting time for everyone else. So it's really difficult to make that time most weeks for me.
Okay, great. Then another problem that we're not solving. Then I have no opinions.
Well, my opinion is, even though they're both fine for me, we should have multiple times because, the same reason it makes sense for the main meeting makes sense for the other meeting as well, right? Like, so
Well-
it's not good to say, well, the working sessions are more optional, right? Because if somebody wants to attend, they should be able to, even if it's optional. So I'd still vote on us having the two different ones.
Let me and if you're not finished,
No, I'm done.
This could present an opportunity to have perhaps one of the alternating working sessions at an earlier time, to always have a consistent time that folks on the other side of the world could chime in on, and at least we would have a consistent time that we could register interest, even though it's a working session as opposed to an official meeting. That's an idea. If we wanted to have a session at a couple hours earlier, 3-4 hours earlier, and have that regularly available for folks.
I think you'd have to alternate that with the later one too, though, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about just the. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Right. Like I like the idea, but it would probably need to be like it alternates between 9 and 2.
Yeah. So
We definitely, like on the TSC, we definitely get a different set of people. Like the 9 a.m. ones, we're not going to get any of the Pacific Coast people. The 4 p.m. ones, I'm all talking in Eastern time, my bias, sorry. But like the 4 p.m. ones, we get a lot less of the European people, obviously. And then the ones in the middle, the 11 or 12, we get the most mixture.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy.
Well, it sounded like, Jory, like you said, the standards meeting was flexible. We should be able to like somehow get it so they're on different alternating weeks, right?
Yeah, I think, so we typically have participation from Emily, and that 2 p.m. slot is pretty late for him. So, I know that if we were able to find an alternate time for that smaller group that was a little bit earlier, that would be something that he would welcome, as would others. So it's just it's a smaller group, so it's usually easier to be flexible with.
Here's an idea. What if we had the CPC meeting and the standards meeting both bi-weekly, but on the same week, and they just always switched? So, 1700 CPC, 1900 standards meeting, 2 weeks later switches, 1700 is standards and 1900 is CPC.
I think that would be just fine.
Okay. And then we could have the off week still be the working session, which mirrors the previous week's time slot. And then moving forward, we can consider other time slots, if we think that makes sense. But that's at least some way for us to get into a biweekly cadence. Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. I will work on that. Get that into the calendar and such. And cool. All right, that's progress. I appreciate it. Great. All right, cool. So we'll just we'll move on, and I'll make those changes later on. Next up is I think we can probably close this, huh? Yep, and Jory already said that 8 minutes ago. The next issue is review individual supporter program designs, which we've already done. And so I will close this issue.
Did we already sort of celebrate that? I know that kind of launched at the end of the year 2020, and so some folks were already heading out, and I missed announcements, so I don't know if we already.
If you're suggesting we
fictional kazoos about how excited we are about.
You're suggesting we have a party, to celebrate. I'm all for it. Just book it. I'll show up with my.
And you all need to listen to the Stack Overflow podcast, which was amazing. It was Sarah and Jory and Miles, right? It's hilarious.
could just like share their screen with the nice logo and the link for anybody who's watching?
Yeah, actually, I'll do that. Well, actually, I can't because I'm not the host, but Robin probably can because she's probably the host.
I'll make it.
I think anybody can share.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a share screen button.
Oh, you? Oh, okay. All right. So let me just go pull this up. And while I do that, I'd love to encourage those of y'all who haven't heard about this to check out JavaScript Landia, our new individual supporter program. Share screen here. JavaScript Landia, share. So you can see on hopefully your screens right now, a really cool new logo, which is also our badge. So all of our new individual supporters are getting a badge that they can share on their LinkedIn and Twitter profiles and that kind of thing, to just show that you support the program. And then they're also getting we've got 130 something now, which
That
is
was my next
amazing.
question. Cool.
Yeah. So we're super excited. And thank you all, everyone on this list. Thank you so much for being an early supporter. And yeah, just can't say enough nice things about you all. You're all wonderful humans. And pretty soon we'll be sharing our first regular newsletter that the supporters will get with kind of updates and previews of things that programs we're doing and news from projects and that kind of thing. So it's $25 a year. It's really, really, really cheap way to show your love for our projects. So.
And it's great. There's so many people already. So
I know.
Fantastic.
So we anticipate rolling out more badges and more different programs for our supporters in 2021. But it was exciting to get this out the door before the end of 2020. We did get so much done last year. So thanks everyone. And yeah, check out the program when you get a chance. I'll stop sharing now.
Cool. Great. Exciting. I'll raise whatever I have to drink here in honor of it. Excellent. Cool. Lots to celebrate there. But I will move on. The next issue on the agenda is the proposal to remove the growth stage. And I remember talking about this sometime late last year. Chris was on the call. Yep, he is still. And approved it, I think at that time. We maybe made a couple changes. I'm trying to see what's going on here.
I think my recollection of what was left to do was for me to go to the AMP TSC and come back with their opinions about it. And I think the next meeting is on Wednesday next week.
Okay, great. Great.
I think that was the last thing that was blocking us.
That was my recollection as well, was that that Toby
Wonderful.
wanted to go get that input. So
Okay. You say next week is the meeting?
I think so. Let me double check though.
Just putting a quick note in here.
Yep, it is. Yep. Right. So I can get back to you all in 2 weeks.
Great. Cool. Brian, the next issue is 632, provide implementation guidance for DCOCLA. No pressure, but anything here?
It's written. I was trying to get somebody else to get some eyes on it, but I got sidetracked by a slight emergency over in jQuery land. Let me get this reviewed this week, so we'll get it done.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
I'm going to skip the next one really quickly and just go to the last one, which is the project status, add growth template to the project status repo. Is there much more that we have to do on this one? Jordan commented. What's left on this? Just, okay, I see in my description, I have a couple of check boxes here.
I can take care of those this week if you want me to.
Yeah, oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we can then wrap that up. That would be awesome.
I was sort of planning to get some of that done during the holidays, but holidays happened.
Yeah, yeah, it sure did. They sure did. All right, cool. So we've got a little less than a half hour, but Toby opened an issue 699. That's the last one here on the agenda that everyone can take a look at. I'll let you or Sarah chime in here, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the idea sort of came from some conversations that we had, and current situation in the world, and like to actually try to do something about diversity and inclusion here as well. And so this was just essentially a placeholder to add a couple of suggestions. So Sarah and I had a chat about this. This was essentially, yeah, a placeholder to put some suggestions and get a conversation started, essentially.
Yeah, I think one thing that Toby said in our meeting that I thought was really thoughtful is, you know, when we have new projects join, we try to make sure that we have, you know, diversity of companies in order to make the project sustainable, and just being thoughtful and helping. I don't think we're looking to make any roadblocks, but just think about how we as an organization can help projects that are joining, maybe thinking about also adding diversity to their steering committees.
Yeah, and if you want some of the other things that we discussed that were on the list, I know that the Linux Foundation has some good educational material on this that we could maybe leverage. I don't know, it could be part of like material that we're supposed as a CPC to have looked at. I haven't looked at it, so, you know, I'm advocating for something that I haven't done. But, you know, that's just a suggestion. I think what else? What are the other sort of like topics that were on there? Yeah.
Your survey, like we talked about, you know, like we don't know that this is an issue where it's like our data is actually fairly, you know, just eyeball only. So we thought about maybe doing a survey to ask, you know, teams if they were looking for help, trying to get a toe in the water to figure out, you know, is this an issue? Do the projects under the foundation, number one, have a diversity issue? Number two, do they want help? And I think after that, you know, like, I don't think there's a clear solution of here's how we're going to help, because I think it's something that everyone's working on, but that we can't help it all if we're not having a conversation.
Yeah, I think like, from my perspective, the more concrete the suggestions, the better. Like so I think projects, you know, if it's like, hey, here are some things that the projects can do that will help, that's like a useful thing that most projects will be like to see and understand. So it's more those kinds of things. Like, I think the last one on your list, like liaising with the other organizations, anything we can do to bring back experience and what works to the projects would be helpful.
Jory had a good comment on the issue here.
Yeah, as y'all were chatting, I think one other concrete thing that we could do is add this as a playbook, you know, for a project that says, oh, we want to put a growth, you know, plan, and this could be one of the things that's a sample goal that they could set that we could help with.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like helping and not like, you know, putting up roadblocks, but being like, here's what part of your growth looks like.
Right.
And we have diversity and inclusion goals at the foundation all up with their board of directors as well. And we look at all parts of the foundation, from our conferences to our leadership to our committees. So would love the CPC's help and really bringing us up, because we're not meeting the stretch goals that we want, for sure.
There's another kind of component to this too, which connects like D&I with like just like good hygiene, good open source repo hygiene. And so, I wonder if there is some, a post or some material that we could create that draws those ideas together as like, but that's just a.
Yeah. Priyanka at CNCF has sort of taken some leadership on that, and I'm happy to share the information to the CPC on that.
Yeah, that
That'd
would
be
be
great.
awesome. I was just about to ask if anyone's doing this really well.
Yep. I will send that along.
So, this seems like something that would be good to use the off week working times for. But that being said, we have 20 minutes now. I don't know if we want to spend that time, thinking more about this and prepping for next meeting or what we want to do.
I think figuring out what concrete next steps would be good. I wonder, how do people feel? Like, I wonder if we could find out that one of the projects in the foundation is doing a good job at this by doing a survey, and then kind of digging into what if we think they're doing something differently. Or because if I think of an open source project that's doing this well, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I mean, I think there's ones that are doing it better than others. But I don't know if anyone has that experience, like viewed something. I don't have an exhaustive list, nor have I. I'm sure people here have interfaced with groups that I haven't.
I think there's also like different layers to it, right? Where we're talking about diversity in leadership groups, like diversity of the TSC, diversity of an advisory group, or, versus diversity of the entire contributor base. Those are distinctly different and perhaps worth taking a look at how that changes.
Yeah, didn't the CNCF actually just release some data around this for themselves recently? Where this was, I think, fairly obvious, where the leadership was mostly male and the rest of the staff was mostly female. So this really does matter, like what's happening at what level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, right? Because like that shows like an imbalance, and that seems like an extra sign of something that you wonder why it's like that, right?
I mean, there is also like the idea that people who aren't male have to often directly show more like impact, and impact is much easier to show through like, I've written these features, I built these things, like these are the ways that I've been impactful and like actually contributed something that is like tangible and usable to my company or beneficial to us in some way. Whereas leadership is like less tangible, and there's less like attachment to that as a like you can't report on that back to your engineering manager that's giving you your time to do this and say, look, I did this, I was a leader and I went and gave like a talk on a panel and like helped all these things that like don't actually contribute to progressing this project forward. And so that's another thing that I think like that, and then just like that is kind of a result of not enabling people to minoritized people to participate at that level, making sure that we are also doing work with those teams and with managers and stuff like that, and with companies to make sure that we can act, like going to the company, talking to the companies and working with those companies is going to be a potentially effective way to help address that and make that space rather than going to the individuals themselves, because often individuals aren't going to be able to have the power to choose that. And like those that do are often end up being like white dudes. So That's something I wanted to bring up here too.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I guess that wasn't a prompt. The prompt I'd maybe have there is, how do we work with our member companies? Like, what materials can the foundation provide to the member companies that then can also be used by external companies to say, hey, like, these are the benefits of allowing folks to contribute and enabling them to contribute. Here's the business value you'll get, like that kind of thing. And that's the way we incentivize that in a more system.
Sarah, you were mentioning like concrete next steps. I really like the survey work that you suggested. And so, my question to sort of the CPC would be, is this something that we'd be interested, willing to do, and how would we go about something like this?
Let me say that I think some of this data may be captured in a automated way. So you take some salt with it from the LF Insights project that has been rolled out. There's some contributor analysis that's been done there. And so perhaps that data, perhaps coupled with additional like quantitative or qualitative inquiry that we may do with like the maintainers, may get us a fuller picture. So just sharing that there may be some already for us.
Does someone know how to get that data and would be willing to do the work to get it to us?
Yeah, Brian and I could do that.
Do we ever do like a survey? Like, I know that everyone's doing, not everyone, lots of folks do developer surveys now, not just to find out diversity data, but just even finding out about contributors or, how much time they spend, what their biggest needs are, that kind of thing. Have we ever done something like that or considered doing something like that? Because it seems like a few birds that could be.
We helped out with the developer ergonomics group a couple of years ago, getting like the foundation projects and stuff. I think this was before it was the OpenJS Foundation, but we like sent it out to all of our members, encouraged them to participate because the survey was about open source and contributions and stuff. They do a quarterly survey, so it might be worth reaching out to them and seeing if they want to like work with us some quarter in a way that kind of, because they have a pretty broad audience. They're a little aggressive and like gamifying, but they're just trying to get people to respond to their survey, which is why it feels like that way. But they do a pretty good job, and I could do an introduction. I can look up their details if that's useful.
Developer ergonomics or economics?
Ergonomics,
I think, yeah.
I remember that. That was one we primarily fielded to the member companies. And I think maybe this is like a thing to just ask ourselves is, do we want to field this survey among the just the OpenJS Foundation member companies, their employees, and or just the open source project contributor communities, which in some cases, those are one and the same. In other cases, those are not the same audience. So it's worth asking that question really quick.
That's a good question. I was thinking the projects, because I think, the view I had on it was that we could more easily influence that because they are working with us to come up with growth plans and things like that, as where the companies maybe less so.
Yeah, I second that.
I'm not disagreeing. I just want to add, like, I do find part of the challenge is getting the companies to give their people space to contribute and participate. Just I think back a little bit to Tierney's comment, and I just worry that if we don't, like, figuring out how to get companies being supportive is part of what will actually make it succeed versus a challenge, because the people we're trying to attract need to have the time and the okay and the support from their companies to actually do the work and get involved.
These would actually be super interesting questions to ask project contributors. Like, how much are you contributing? How easy it is for you to contribute? Are you contributing on your on the work clock or on the moonlighting, or whatever the term is? Jory.
No, I'm waiting my turn.
No, that's what I mean. I thought all of these questions would be interesting to get from the projects themselves, and then help us inform maybe not only a diversity and inclusion effort, but a broader one.
I was just raising my hand to say, I think what we may be saying is that we would like to try to field a first ever OpenJS Foundation community-wide survey that asks some of these questions. And that's an exciting idea. Robin, can we?
Well, it's interesting because we're doing really the last really big, broad Node.js developer survey. It's sort of been a tradition at the Node.js Foundation, and it is a heavy lift, but we have professionals who are supporting. We do get into a lot of these questions in that Node survey. We just sort of did a near final proofread yesterday, and we will get some of that data. I just had a meeting with our other executive directors at the LF. We were actually having a similar conversation as well, from LF Insights to what unique data can we research. So I think what we, I would recommend, I do like starting with kind of doing an inventory and analysis, kind of where we are today amongst our projects, setting some goals, and then figuring out what we want to find out before we say, let's go do a survey, just to make sure we're not starting in the middle, right? So, which I'd love to do, but really find out what's out there and where can we add value and new insights.
Yay, research!
Yay, research.
So what's the plan here? Except
I'll go
Jory's
to
gonna
LF
do
Insights
research.
and pull. I'll go to LF Insights and pull data, and I'm happy to pull data on any existing research from developer surveys that are going out. We can take a look at the Node.js survey too. It's still not quite too late. I think Rachel was just going to have a couple of folks give it a final read, but we do ask a lot of those questions. And then I think we should just sort of have another working session and develop sort of the plan on what do we hope to learn more specifically.
I think it'd be great to spend that working session deciding upon like the research questions, of which there's probably 2 or maybe 3 that we could ask in a survey, and then use the existing data that we have and perhaps look at some of those node questions and see if once that's fielded, that can give us sort of like the baseline. Mm-hmm. And then
yeah, and it sort of depends. We've been trying to do like more, I call them happy meals, smaller surveys. We did that with the Node, what was it, on promises? I can't remember. Kind of more of a feature.
Promises.
Yeah, and we had close to 3,000 responses. So we have a wonderful broad community who is very responsive. So if we wanted to do shorter surveys that are more focused, I think we can be really agile about doing that.
I also think to the point Toby was making, I've been in and out, sorry, because of the smells and the people renovating next door. To the point Toby made earlier, I think like having at least a survey, like a 5, 6, 7 question survey around like, where do you work? Does your employer enable you to do this open source work? How much of your time do they enable you to do? Because those are 2 different things. And like, would you do more if you could? Like that kind of stuff, like just like a very brief, like under 10 question survey to existing contributors would be helpful, I think, in just understanding, because that would at least like, this is at least the base we already have, and we can know what we need to do to grow that. And that probably also, like, I think having some kind of foundation materials for corporations, because like this is one thing I saw when I was at Node Source, is like, to affect any change, you have to go to the company. You can't go to individuals. And so having materials to give to companies and have people be able to pull and give to their manager, or like give to someone in their leadership, from the foundation would be a really good resource if we want to approach this and like at a scale that's more reasonable, I think.
And we could couple that with some storytelling, some blogging about individuals who are enabled to spend time from diverse communities. So
yeah.
Lead by example with real people.
Another one of the items on that thing was to add a diversity requirement to impact projects. Is this thing people are comfortable about? Can let me phrase this differently. Is anyone upset about me doing a pull request on this?
I guess what are you going to make the requirement?
Yeah.
My inclination would be to leave the requirements for the TSC, for the maintainers of that project to decide and propose like they do for all of the other items, really. So not define diversity, but just make that a requirement. I mean, make diversity a requirement without defining it. Sort of like leave the question open. It's kind of obvious if something is diverse or not, I mean, frankly.
So, but is it it's basically going to just then be, tell us where you're at or your thoughts, or I'm just trying to like concretely, what are we going to do when we get one of these?
My understanding from the growth requirement to move to impact stage of most of those is sort of a delta of where you're at and where you're hoping to get to, and have the CPC approve this. And hence, I don't think this would be widely more different. It's more of like buying into the idea that this is something you care about and want to do something to change if you're not in a situation where you have a diverse and inclusive structure, rather than actually like meet some numbers. I mean, the opposite side of like meeting some numbers is you get into absurd situations like France's mayor in office in Paris, who is paying fines because they have too many women. Right, so which is just like really absurd when you're actually trying to solve a diversity problem. Someone actually solves it in one instance. It's like above the threshold, so now like it's no longer. So I don't think like getting into like very strict numbers like this is actually really helpful. So yeah, I would leave it open. I would leave it open.
I would recommend that we check and see if our impact projects do or do not already have diversity goals. I would suspect that they all do. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
Really?
Like I mean, it depends what you mean by goals, right? Like I know projects would be supportive and would like to improve on that front, but if you said what are your specific goals, I'd have a hard time figuring out what those might be.
I mean, just to be specific. Oh, sorry, Robin.
Yeah, but if you're talking about not being specific on numbers, on metrics.
And just to be clear, I was specifically talking about the leadership team. Similar requirements to having multi-vendor representatives in the leadership team. Something of that nature. I don't know what the exact wording is off the top of my head. But yeah, Robin, your point is well taken. It would be interesting to see if there is existing wording. And so maybe I should go look into that before.
Yeah, definitely. If there's some existing wording from some of the projects that can be, like, here's something we could ask that you include somewhere. That sounds.
So we have what, Node, Dojo, Electron here, Mocha, any others? So Jordan. But if we're talking what, impact projects? Is that what you're thinking, Toby?
I mean, the idea was impact projects have requirements around, multi-vendor, multi-user, So diversity of vendor. So it was just like, well, why don't we have just like diversity of people in the technical steering committee too?
I think it's going to depend a lot on the size of the project. So like for NVM, like I desperately want, my diversity goals are more people, more than just me. So like if those people happen to also be different demographics than me, then that's even better. But like I just need a warm body at this point. So like,
yeah, I was gonna say the same
while
thing.
I will happily and enthusiastically adopt any explicit diversity goals that are recommended. It's at the moment it's immaterial because there are 0 candidates. So it's not helping me make a decision between 2 otherwise equivalent candidates.
That's a great point.
And yeah, so like, and I would imagine similarly, even if a project has like 3 or 4 maintainers, like if there's no one else trying to be a maintainer, like it's probably still useful. There's probably some outreach they could do to try and encourage people to be maintainers that are from a different set of demographics than the current set. But like, that trying to get people interested is a much harder problem, I think, than, let me rephrase. It's a very different kind of problem from, you have a pool of candidates and you're trying to address your, unconscious or systemic or, unaddressed bias, right? Like those are both important and they both need to be dealt with, but like, it just may not be relevant to every project, even if they're on board.
I agree with that. I think that like, I've been in Node for a while and having kind of starting to get into Electron, like the time and energy required to work on Electron in like a core or leadership position, it like has to be sponsored by a corporation, and the corporations that are willing to sponsor that are doing that. And it's like the people who are able to do that are doing it already. And it's not something like people can casually just come by. Like if people could casually come by and do it, that's great. Like we would absolutely enable that. But the technical skill and experience is not something you can just kind of like casually pick up, like, like I did with Node 5 years ago. You have to like be very persistent and there and present, and to the point where like if you're doing it, you can't just do it like passively on your free time. And so in that vein, like I think that this is not like a thing that can be generally universally applied to projects, just because of like the vast and broad approaches that projects have to management, and the like different skill levels and like necessities to persist the skill to participate, if that makes sense. So like literally being able to be paid to work on Electron is like a good way. It is nearly a requirement to be able to be present enough to be in a position like that. At least that's my perspective. I could be wrong. Others in the project might disagree, but yeah.
We're over time, folks.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think I'll just add real quickly that I think it makes sense to have like recommendations and such before we get to that point, Toby. So then, we can be helpful. And these recommendations may even help getting new contributors, depending on what we're able to come up with. But I think that would be the first step.
Mm-hmm. And I would just want to add, I know that a lot of you all have been working individually, not in a programmatic way, but I know you're all passionate about it. And I've seen the results of your outreach. So that matters a lot too, that more organic.
Yeah. Cool. So should we use the off week next week to work on this some more?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds
good seeing you all.
Bye.
Yeah.
Talk to everybody later.
Folks.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.